Hello Divination and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to create a horizontal self-scrolling list made with Divi's scroll effects. This is the final result we're aiming to achieve. So without wasting a lot of time, let's dive in and let's get started. All right, so the first thing we need to do is to create a brand new page. So I'm going to come over here to pages and click on add new. We're going to give this page a name, and it doesn't really matter what name you give it. And also you can use this technique on any page you have on your website currently. All right, so I'm going to go ahead now and click use Div Builder. So the first thing we need to do here is to make sure we build this from scratch, because in our example, this is what we're going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and click on start building. I'm going to close this out for now. And then on the top left, I'm going to go into my section settings. The first thing here is to add my background color. So I'm going to paste it in here. And by the way, if you want to use the exact same colors as I am using in this tutorial, I will leave a link to the post in the show notes below. All right, so next I'm going to come over here to advanced, and then we're going to go to visibility. So here we need to set our overflow to hidden, and this needs to be on both the vertical and horizontal. So let's go ahead and do that. And then the next thing we need to do is to add our row. So I'm going to save this, click here on this plus button, and we're going to add a single column. And we're just going to close this for now. We're not going to add any modules yet. So the next thing we need to do now is to click here on this gear icon, go to background, and go into the third tab. So what we're going to do here is to add an image. So I'm going to click on this plus button, and this is the image I am going to use. And if you download the layout pack, the layout will have all the images that you need in case you want to follow step by step. All right, so with that selected, I'm going to click upload an image. So now my image has been uploaded. Next, I'm going to set my size. So I'm going to come over here to design sizing. So the width here needs to be at 90%. So I'm going to manually add it. And the maximum width is going to be 1580. Now let's head over here to spacing. So the first thing we need to do here is to add a bottom margin of 200. This is so that we just have enough space between our elements that we're going to add on our page. Next, on the padding here, we're going to set this to 100 for both top and the bottom. And notice I'm activating this chain. All right, so with that done, I'm going to save. And then the next thing is to add our text module. So I'm going to click on this plus button, search for my text module, and select it. I'm going to paste my dummy text in here, but in your case, this is where you add your heading. All right, so now that I've added this, I need to stylize it. So I'm going to come over here to design. Now, in fact, you know what? Before I go to design, let's set this to heading 2. So I've highlighted it, click here on this drop down and set it to heading 2. Great. Now I can go now to my design tab, click on the heading text and make sure you're on the heading 2 tab. If you don't do this, it won't work. Now over here now, I'm going to choose my font and it's called Railway. So I'm going to go ahead and select it. Next, I'm going to set my font weight to semi-bold. The alignment needs to be centered. And now it's time to add our color. So I'm going to click here on my color picker and paste my color in here. Now, as I mentioned before, if you want to use the exact same colors as I'm using throughout this tutorial, I will leave a link to the post in the show notes below. All right, so now let's add our heading to text size, and we're going to set this to 70. And while we're here, we might as well go into our other devices. So here on the tablet, we're going to set this to 50 pixels. And then on the phone, we're going to set this to 40 pixels. Now, it's important that you go in and make sure that your sizes look great in all screen sizes. All right, so now that I've done here, I'm going to save, and then I'm going to add a divider to the column. So I'm going to click here. All right, so the next step now is to add a divider to our column. So I'm going to click here on this little icon to show my layers. And then I'm just going to go in and add my divider this way. So I'm going to click here on this plus button and search for divider and select it. So the next step now is to make sure that my color is visible. And also you want to make sure that show divider is activated. Next, over here on the design, I'm going to go to line and then choose my line color and place my color in here. And now you can see it's much easier to see it on that dark background. All right, so now that I have this, the next step now is to adjust the size of our divider. So I'm going to scroll down here a little bit and go into sizing. So here on sizing, we're going to go on to the divider weight, and we're going to set this to 20 pixels. And for our width, we're going to set this to 11%. Now make sure it's percent because there's a big difference there. Now for our modular alignment, we're going to align this to the center. And for our height, we're going to set this to 20. Now we're going to give this some rounded corners. So I'm going to come over here to border, and on all sides, I'm going to set this to 20 pixels. Now notice that my chain here is activated. If your chain is not activated, the border will only be applied to one of the sides. All right, so we're done here. I'm going to save. And now it's time to add another column. So I'm going to click here on this plus button and add my second column. And this is also going to have a single column. All right, so with that now, we are going to go straight into our settings. So I'm going to go into this gear icon to go into my row settings and click on design spacing. So here I'm going to start with my left and right padding. So I'm going to go in and set this to 0%, and I'm going to activate this chain. Now I'm going to go into my column settings. So I'm going to go back over here, click on this gear icon and click on background and add my color in here. So I'm going to paste it like that. And then over here on the design, I'm going to add some padding. So I'm going to start off by setting this to 3%, and this needs to be applied both to the top and the bottom. But you know what? On the bottom here, let's set this to 2%. And here on the left and right, we're going to set this to 2% on both sides. Okay, next let's head over here to our border and set this to 30 pixels. And again, our border is going to be applied to all the sides. Now we have a bit of CSS code that we need to add for this to work. So I'm going to come over here on advanced custom CSS on the main element. I am going to add this CSS code. So you can see here, this has added a shadow and it's making this area here now show on this light background. And also the link to this CSS code will be in the video description below. All right, so while we're here, let's head over here to our visibility and set our overflow. And this time I want to set this to visible on both the horizontal and the vertical. So pretty much I am done here. I'm going to save one more time, and then I'm going to add my image module. So I'm going to search for it here and select it. I'm going to come over here and here's my image. Now the size I'm using here is 160 by 160 pixels, but in your case, just make sure that it's a square. It makes it look much better that way. All right, so I've added my image here. I'm going to click upload, and you can see here my image has been added. Next, I am going to come over here to design alignment and make sure my image is centered. All right, so the next thing is to add my top margin. So I'm going to come over here on spacing, and for my top margin here, I'm going to set it to -10, and this needs to be %. So make sure you add -10% there. All right, so I've added now my margin, and as you can see here, my image has just moved slightly out of this container. All right, so now that I've added that, we just want to add a few filters to this. So I'm going to come all the way down here and click on filters, and we're going to come over here to saturation. So for our saturation, as you can see, it's set to 100%. So we're going to bring it all the way down to 0. Next, we're going to come over here to a contrast, and we're going to set this to 200%. And then we're going to go to our positions by clicking here on advanced position, and we want this to be absolute. We also want it centered and top centered. So now you can see it's in the right position. All right, so we're going to save this now, and we're going to now add a text module to our column. So I'm going to search for it and select it. I'm going to paste my text in here, and let's set this text to heading 3. So I'm going to highlight it and click on this drop down and set heading 3. Now it's time to go in and customize and stylize our heading. So I'm going to click here on design, heading text, heading 3, and I'm going to change my font here to railway, because remember we used this before. And my font weight, we're going to set this to semi-bold. And now it's time to add our color. So I'm going to come to the color picker, paste my color in here, and as I mentioned before, I will leave a link to the post in the show notes below, so you can copy the exact same colors if you need to. So we're just going to bump this up again to about 28 and then save. Next, we're going to add a divider to this column. So I'm going to search for my divider and select it. And we also want this divider to show. So make sure show divider is activated. And then next, I'm going to add my divider color by coming over here to design, line, clicking on the eyedropper tool and pasting my color in here. Next, we're going to come over here now to sizing. So for my divider weight, I'm going to set this to 20 pixels. And for my width, I'm going to set this to 21. And this is 21%, by the way. And then on the height, I'm going to set this to 20 pixels. And we're also going to add our border. So over here, we're going to add rounded corners, and this is going to be 20 pixels all around. And now you can see we have this beautiful shape here. And all right, the next step now is to add some CSS code again. So we're going to come over here to advanced, custom CSS, and in the main element is where I'm going to paste my CSS code. Now, as I mentioned before, I will leave a link to all this code in the show notes below. All right, so now that we have this all set, it's time now to add our text. So I'm going to save this, add another module, and this again is going to be a text module. I'm going to select it. We're going to replace this with our text. And remember, you need to add your text that describes what your website is about. All right, so now that I've added this, the next step now is to stylize my text. So I'm going to come over here to design text, and I'm going to change my font here to Railway. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is to maintain consistency, because I really want to have the same fonts that I'm using throughout this page. Next, I'm going to come over here to my text color. So I'm going to click on the eyedropper tool and add my color. And for my line height, I'm going to set this to 2.7. And for my text alignment, I'm going to leave it at left and then save. Now for this, we're going to need a call to action. So let's add a button. So I'm going to click here on this plus button and search for my button module. I'm going to select it. Now here you can add whatever text you want for your call to action. So for this example, I'm just going to add read more. So now let's stylize this button, because as you can see, this is the default style that the button comes in with the normal module. So I'm going to come over here to design, button, and then activate use custom styles for button. So the first thing I'm going to do here is to add my button text color. So I'm going to add my color like that. And we also need to add our button background color. So I'm going to come over here and click here on this plus button and paste my color like that. And for the border, I'm going to set my border to 0. Next, for the border radius, we're going to set this to 100 pixels. And for our button font, again, we're going to use Railway because we've used this before. Now let's head over here to spacing. Okay, so here on spacing, what we're going to do is to start by adding a bottom margin. So I'm going to set this to -5%. And then for the top and bottom padding, we're going to set this to about 30 pixels. And then left and right padding is going to be 100 pixels. So I'm going to come over here and enter it. And this needs to be both sides. So I'm going to activate the chain. Now it's time to add our CSS. I'm going to come over here to the advanced tab, custom CSS, and paste my CSS code like that. All right, so our button now is looking great. So now I'm going to come over here to my position, and again, we want this to be absolute and we want it centered as well. But this time the location is going to be on the bottom. Right, so now it's time to turn this into a self-scrolling list. So I'm going to save this, and then we're going to go back over here to our row settings. So in our row settings here, we need to go into design, sizing, activate custom gutter width, and we're going to set this to 2. For our width, we're going to set this to 220%. And for the maximum width, it's going to be the same. Let's go ahead and add 220%. So next, I'm going to come back over here, and we're going to clone this column here a few times. In fact, we need to do it 5 times. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so there we go. I've just cloned this 5 times. Now, while we are in our row settings, we're going to come over here to advanced, click on scroll effects. And what we need here is the horizontal motion. So I'm going to go ahead and activate it and say yes here to enable horizontal motion. So let's start with our starting offset. So here we're going to set this to 8, and the ending here is going to be -35. And the midpoint is fine at 0. Now over here now on the viewport, we're going to set this to 40. And then the final viewport top needs to be at 62, like that. So pretty much I'm done here. I'm going to save this. And we're going to go to our section here and increase our padding. So I'm going to come over here to design, spacing, and we're going to set our top and bottom padding to 300 pixels. And pretty much this is our final design. So I'm going to save this. And you can see here as I'm scrolling, this looks great. So I'm going to publish this and exit the Visual Builder. So there we go. So there you have it. Thank you all for watching. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and do follow us on our social media platforms. By doing so, you'll be notified every time we release new tutorials. Until next time, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.